you know off the top of your head where Iowa's ranked?
And I believe the coaches. Did both polls come out today? Or are you talking about your poll?
No, I'm talking about the AP and coaches polls. Yeah.
One of them, they were 23. I don't know if that was the coaches or the AP poll. I'm sure somebody will throw it in the chat here in a second when we're talking about it. One of them, they were number 23, and people were complaining they fell so far. Who cares at this point? I mean,
so yeah. So do you care where Iowa is ranked?
No, and why would I?
In the final poll?
I'm not saying anybody. Let me just say this: I'm not trying to take away from your poll. All right, because your poll, first of all, does make sense, and I've said that many a time. But honestly, any polls to me at this point in the season mean nothing because
you don't.
Unless
I'm just curious to know whether you cared. Do you care if Iowa's number 17 or they're number 22? You could care less.
This is like the third straight year Iowa's finished in the top 25, which is the biggest streak. I mean, they finished in the top 25 a lot under Kirk, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's more than 3 years, but maybe somebody has that as well. But they're on a streak right now, finishing in the top 25, which I'd rather be finishing in the top 10. But
they finished at 23 in both major polls. So to put that into context, and the teams that you would think would be a direct comparison would, of course, be the teams that they played and had similar records in division. So
are they the lowest ranked 10-win team, Mark? Power 5 10-win team?
It appears so.
That's the way it should be.
I believe so.
I mean, that's the way it should be, right?
So this is what surprises me. So my rankings are quite a bit different than these rankings. These do not have, there is no Wisconsin, Purdue, or Minnesota in the final top 25.
How is there no Minnesota?
I have all three of them in the top 25. How is Purdue not in the top 25? They beat Michigan State. They beat Iowa. Who else did they beat?
Minnesota was 9-4.
So was Purdue. They were all 9-4, and obviously Iowa had the 10th win, 10-4. And that's why I thought it was an interesting comparison. So they have none of them. So in the AP, Wisconsin's 27, Minnesota 28, Purdue 29.
Yeah, it's interesting because Wisconsin and Purdue spanked Iowa.
Yeah.
So I know head-to-head's not everything. I get that. But Iowa's got 4 losses. Those teams have 4 losses.
And I would argue that the other 3 teams all had tougher schedules.
You don't have to argue. You don't have to argue. I'll argue for Iowa next year, but no, Iowa's schedule this year was one of the worst in the Big Ten. Maybe the worst.
2 of them played Notre Dame non-conference. And there was also just a mix of Ohio State, Michigan, out of conference, etc. And of course, Iowa made up that Michigan game in the title game.
I believe Wisconsin. Did Wisconsin go to Penn State?
Penn State at home.
Oh, it was in Madison.
Yeah.
Okay. Still though, that's a solid. I mean, Iowa played Penn State too. I understand that, but
I had Purdue 18, Minnesota 19, Wisconsin 20, and Iowa 21. I lined them all up in the order that I.
So you have a little bit more respect for Iowa than the AP poll, though. You certainly have more respect for those other Big Ten teams. You got more respect for Iowa than the AP.
I don't understand. BYU lost to UAB in a bowl game, and they're ranked 19th in the country. UAB. I don't understand this. You're Oregon.
Well, where's Oregon?
And Oregon's at 22, 1 spot ahead of Iowa. But there are group of 5 teams. And this is, I know this is difficult to do because I go through the exercise all the time, that you're trying to rank group of 5s. Not only is the Power 5 difficult to a certain extent, but for me, I've got a pretty good grasp on that. But once you start to look at the group of 5 and let's say a 10-3, let's say a 11-2 group of 5 team versus like a 9-4, how do you make that comparison? But if you really look at the results on the field between the group of 5 and the Power 5, the Power 5 wins 85% of the time. I've run the numbers many years. There's no comparison between the levels of play. So to me, I just don't even compare. Utah State's 10-3 and Minnesota's 9-4, and Utah State's getting ranked and Minnesota's not. That's ridiculous. That's
Yeah,
just,
I think that's the and maybe we're too top heavy as far as how we. And I'm not saying I say we as far as the voters top heavy as far as how they view strength of wins, because sometimes we like to say, and it's sort of what the NCAA tournament does to a different degree. But if you say, well, they played 3 really good teams. So if you look, for instance, Cincinnati played, would you say 2 really good teams before the playoff? Well, they played,
yes.
yeah, I mean, Houston, Notre Dame, right?
Yeah.
Am I missing anybody in there?
No.
But see, people will do that, and then you look at Iowa, and they say, well, Iowa's only good teams they played were Minnesota, and there was nobody else. But the fact of the matter is, cumulatively, Iowa's still, their schedule was ridiculously better. But again, this is when we have humans doing this. That's why you're going to have these kinds of results.
I just
like coaches. I've always thought coaches, this is one thing I never understood about the coaches poll. The AP polls, whatever. The coaches poll. These are coaches, Mark. Correct? These are that's how the polls operate. Am I missing something? So,
well, the only disclaimer I'll put there, and I've been so detached for a long time, but when I was more involved, when I was covering the beat for 7 years in the SEC, and I had that day-to-day contact with sports information directors, I think for the most part, and every coach is different to a certain extent, I think they put their stamp of approval on whatever the SID wants to, you fill out my top 25, but make sure that Minnesota's below us and Wisconsin's below us and so-and-so's out. And there you go. You fill in the rest.
what a stupid setup. Why do we even have those polls? I mean, so ridiculous, but that doesn't surprise me. So anyways,
I'm going to shoot a video now that I'm looking at this and realizing that there's just so much confirmation between the levels of play in the group of 5 and the Power 5. Like Louisiana is a great example. They went 13-1. Good for them. That's great. They're a good football team, and they finished 16 in the AP. But this is typical. When they played a Power 5 team, Texas is awful. Didn't make a bowl game. 1-5. They lost by 21 points. They lost by 3 touchdowns.
Last year when they went up to Ames, Mark.
Well, they did. Yeah, but that's just typical. I'm not just cherry picking. That's pretty typical.
Yeah, you're right. Well, as I've said,
why are we ranking them? I ranked them too, but I did not rank them ahead of the likes of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Purdue.